they talk about in the paper divine providence on several occasions, and God had a hand in a lot of things, and we firmly believe that. But we cannot forget the foundation of us, and this is Oklahoma history, a great part of Oklahoma history. Sheriff Eddie Rice, come and introduce our program.
Law enforcement's a calling. Not everybody, the ones that do it well need to be recognized, because if it wouldn't have been for somebody that was dedicated to serving the public, this would not have happened. This crime may have went unsolved. We don't know. It was on April 19th, 1995, during a routine traffic stop that made an arrest, the one of his career. The arrest of Timothy McVeigh, one of the co-conspirators of the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. If he would not have been diligent in taking care of what we're supposed to take care of, it would have never happened. And he'll fill you in on the story, but I thank you for being there, for doing the job that you were hired to do, and that's why this criminal was brought to justice.
Lion Dean, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to be here today. I'm going to share with you that story of that arrest that happened that day and the days that following, things that happened. I'm going to bring out 3 points as I tell you this story today. One of them, divine intervention, took place that day and the days following. I'll be talking to you about traffic enforcement and how there's benefits beyond the traffic stop itself. And last but not least, visit with you about how each of us, as citizens, can help fight the war on crime and terrorism every day. On the morning of April 19th, 1995, that was a spring morning that I went to work on a day shift that morning about 7 o'clock. Had been a trooper for about 18 and a half years, had worked many shifts by that time in my career. At that time, I was responsible for 2 areas in Noble County, actually part of Payne County and Noble County. I had the Interstate 35 in both counties, and all of the secondary roads in Noble County. That particular morning, I decided to go east on Highway 64, take me over to the east side of the county over to Cimarron Turnpike. I walked into the troop headquarters there on the turnpike. Almost instantly, I heard Oklahoma City headquarters on the radio sending numerous units to the downtown Oklahoma City area. I mean, just one unit after the other. Myself and other troopers there knew something was going on. We didn't know what. There was television there at headquarters. We turned it on and got the same coverage that most everybody here probably saw. The front of the Murrah building, the third of the building was gone. The parking lot across the street, cars are on fire. Total chaos. And I'm thinking to myself, many people must have been injured and killed. But never did I think an act of terrorism. I thought maybe a natural gas explosion or something of that nature. But the act of terrorism never entered my mind while I was watching that. Well, watching that just a couple of minutes, I get a radio call from headquarters instructing me to getting my unit to go into service and report to Oklahoma City at the command post to receive an assignment. So I get back in my unit, go back across Highway 64, red lights and siren, I get to Interstate 35, which is on the west side of Perry, and I'm preparing to go south to Oklahoma City. This is where the divine intervention starts. I don't go a half a mile south on the interstate, I received a second radio call telling me to disregard that assignment, to remain in my area on routine patrol. So I crossed this intermedian because I'd had word that there was a possible motorist needing assistance just north of the First Street exit, from the North Perry exit. I arrived up there at that location, and I found 2 ladies in a van. Their alternator was out, and they were disabled. One of those ladies was a wife of an Oklahoma City firefighter, and she was aware of what was going on in Oklahoma City and was concerned about what her husband's involvement might be in that operation. Wanted to get their van fixed quickly so they could return to Oklahoma City. That is more divine intervention. Because while I was sitting there Little did I know, Tim McVeigh in that old yellow Mercury passed my location as I was sitting there waiting for that wrecker to arrive so those ladies could get the help they needed. When the wrecker arrived, I get in my unit and I decided to go north on Interstate 35 and go to the northwest part of the county near a community called Billings, Oklahoma, where I investigated an accident on Easter Sunday. April the 19th, 95 was on a Wednesday. I wanted to go up there and look at that accident scene in the daylight to see if I'd missed any evidence, because I felt like sometime during my shift I'm probably still going to be sent to Oklahoma City, and I wanted to get this paperwork and everything out of the road before that happened. So I'm traveling up the interstate at a rather high rate of speed, trying to get to my location, and I'm within a mile of exiting off I-35 onto State Highway 15 when I go past an old yellow Mercury. I'm in the left lane, he's in the right lane. I'm going much faster than he is. But as I go by, I look at the rear bumper, and where the tag should be, there was nothing. So by the time I'm reacting to this, I'm ahead of this vehicle. I slow down, fall back behind him, change lanes, and initiate what I thought was just another routine traffic stop. Where was I wrong? I begin this traffic stop, and it started like most others. The driver reacted to my lights, began pulling over to the shoulder. However, his stop was not normal to most traffic violators because he pulled his vehicle halfway into the grass. The right wheels were in the grass, the left wheels were still up on the asphalt portion of the shoulder. And I'm pulled up behind him, offset a little bit, and I open my door and stand behind it because that's the way I was trained to conduct my traffic stops. The officers, not all of them do that today. I stood behind that door for protection in the event that a violent encounter would occur. I would have some protection. I get out, standing behind that open door, and I yell to the driver to step out of his vehicle. In a few seconds, the driver's door opens. But the driver didn't just immediately get out. He turned to the west, sat on the edge of his seat, was looking out to the west, feet on the ground, but he's not looking back at me and he's not getting out. So again, I yell to him, driver, step out of the vehicle. In a few seconds, he stands up and begins walking toward me. His hands are empty. I don't feel there's a threat. I step out from behind my open door. We walk toward each other and meet between the two cars. I tell him why I've stopped him. I said, the reason I've stopped you is because you don't have a tag. He immediately looks to the rear bumper where the tag should be and just as quickly looks back at me and he says, oh, I knew I didn't have a tag. I just bought this car recently and I haven't had time to get one. Now, because officers are taught to read body language and nonverbal communications, my thought was, if you knew you didn't have a tag, why did you look? And so I'm thinking maybe it's a stolen vehicle. Now, this is a clean-cut young man. He's about 6 foot tall. You know, he's not heavy, overweight, short military-style haircut, wearing military boots, dark pants, and he's got a windbreaker jacket that's blue and just zipped up at the bottom a little bit. So because I'm thinking this is a stolen car, I say, do you have a bill of sale for this car? No, I do not. The salesman I bought it from is still filling it out. He said, how long does it take to fill out a bill of sale? I don't have it. So I began to think, even more so now that it's a stolen car. I asked him for his proof of insurance. He didn't have any. So, well, what about a driver's license? Do you have a driver's license? Yes, I do. He goes to his right rear pocket to retrieve his billfold, and when he did, it tightened that jacket up, and under it I could see a bulge that looked like a weapon. He removes his driver's license and hands it to me, and I look at the picture. It looks like the same guy I'm talking to. I take his license and I stick it in my gun belt, and I instruct him. I said, I want you to take both hands, slowly unzip that jacket, and slowly pull it back because I want to look under it. He begins to comply. He unzips the jacket. He just starts to pull it back, and he looks me in the eye and he says, I have a weapon. At that time, I reached up, I grabbed the bulge on the outside of his jacket, I grabbed him, and I'm spinning him around, telling him to get his hands in the air. I drew my weapon and stuck it to the back of his head. And then I instructed him to walk to the trunk of his car. We're about halfway to the trunk of his car when he made a statement that at the time I thought he was trying to intimidate me. He said, my weapon is loaded. And I nudged him in the back of the head with the barrel of my pistol. I said, so is mine. And we continued to walk. Get to the trunk, I spread him out on the trunk, pull his jacket back. I see, then I'm thinking in my own mind, well, I know what he meant by making that statement, because he has a pistol in what I call a suicide holster where the barrel points upward toward the armpit, and I've got a death grip on the outside of that jacket. I think he was afraid I was going to discharge that weapon and blow his arm off. So I removed the weapon, I threw it to the shoulder of the road. He says, I have a knife and a scabbard under there also. Pulled the jacket back, saw the knife, threw it to the shoulder. He said, I have another magazine for that weapon under there also. I removed that, threw it to the shoulder of the road. Finished patting him down, didn't find any other weapons. Handcuffed him, took him back and placed him in the front seat of my patrol car and seatbelted him in. I went back up to the shoulder and retrieved those items that I'd taken off of him. Went back to the trunk of my patrol car, and I'm unloading this Glock 45 caliber pistol, a semi-automatic pistol. I take the magazine out of it, it's loaded, fully loaded with 45 caliber round ball ammunition. But when I eject the round that's in the chamber that is ready to fire, I find that it's a black Talon round, which is a Teflon coated bullet designed to penetrate a bulletproof vest. I take the unloaded pistol, I go back up to my patrol car. My headquarters has no idea where I'm at, what I'm doing, nothing. Because the radio net was directed to the ongoing emergency in Oklahoma City. No one could use the radio unless they had an emergency themselves. But I had a cell phone. Not one of these nice little cell phones like we all carry on our side now, but this was a bag phone. Some of you may see it, I'm dating myself. This antenna sticking out the top of it. And I star 55 headquarters answers on the first screen. I'm talking to the dispatcher, telling them what I've got, where I'm at. And I say, I need you to run some checks to NCIC. NCIC is the computer system in Washington, D.C., ran by the FBI. It's the National Crime Information Center, where all officers across the nation run checks for people that are wanted to see if they have records, see if items were stolen, and so forth. I began by running a check on this weapon. And I'm looking for the serial number as I'm talking to the dispatcher on the phone, and I don't readily find it. And I'm telling her I'm having difficulty finding it, and Tim McVeigh, sitting right next to me, says, that serial number is DM731. And about that time I find it, and I said, that's close, you're only one digit off. I said, most people wouldn't know that. And he said, well, I do. So I thought, well, this guy's a gun enthusiast, no doubt, or he wouldn't know that. And maybe it's because of military training, because he looked like he could have recently been in the military with his haircut. He was being in good shape and so forth. But I run that weapon through NCIC and it's not reported stolen. I run Tim McVeigh's name through NCIC, he's not reported wanted. I can't find a criminal record, felony conviction that would prohibit him from possessing a firearm. Now at that time we did not have a concealed carry permit available in the state of Oklahoma. That law was actually, that bill that turned into our state law was before our state legislators that very session, but had not passed yet. I also had the dispatcher send a teletype to Junction City, Kansas, where McVeigh says he bought that car from a Firestone dealer. From a salesman by the name of Tom. I wanted to verify all that since he had no paper. And so I'm waiting on the dispatcher to call back some information. I hang up. I'm talking to McVeigh. I read him his Miranda warning. He says it's his rights. He says he understands them, agrees to talk to me. He agrees, consents to a search of his car. I go up to the car he's driving and look for the vehicle identification number on the front windshield. Come back and I run it through NCIC. It's not reported stolen. I can't find a registration check to find out who the owner is through Oklahoma or Kansas. And so I'm talking to the dispatcher again. I said, well, there's some type of sticker on the windshield. I'll see what that is and we'll try that state. And again, Tim McVeigh speaks up and says, that's an Arkansas sticker. I said, well, run it through Arkansas. The dispatcher did. Gets returned, coming back to a couple living in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Nothing would indicate that it's stolen. Now, while I'm talking to Tim McVeigh, he's telling me that he's on his way back from Arkansas because that's where he's moving to. And he's going up to Kansas to get the rest of his belongings so he can complete his move. I go back up to the car. I began a physical search of the car. It started in the area of the driver's seat. Not much in the car. There was a ball cap, a piece of lined writing paper with some writing on it, and an envelope, a legal-sized envelope, about a quarter to half inch thick, sealed up. Felt like currency, like cash in it. That's what I thought it was. I had no probable cause to open it, and I didn't. As I got my knees up in the front seat, and I turned around and looked at the back seat to see what's back there, and I noticed my prisoner, who was handcuffed behind his back, was squirming around in my car. So I go back, open the door, I said, "What are you doing? Are you trying to get out of the cuffs?" And he said, "No, they're tight." I said, "Well, I don't think they are, but we'll check them." So I get him out, loosen him a little bit, put him back in, seatbelt him back up. I go back and complete my search. Don't find anything of any significance in the car. So I go back to talk to him about what we're going to do with this car. I said, "You have two choices. We can either impound it at your expense or leave it at the roadside at your risk. If somebody vandalizes it or steals it, it's on you. What do you want to do?" He chose to leave it at the roadside rather than have it impounded. And so I asked him, "Do you have any valuables in it that you want to take to jail with you? I'll get them out and we'll take them to jail." Because I really wanted to look in that envelope. And I said, "What about that envelope? I knew if we took it to jail, we could inventory it even with his property." He said, "You want to take that envelope with you?" "No, leave it there in the car." So I did. Went back up, made sure the windows were all rolled up, locked all the doors. Went back to my unit. We crossed the center median and started our trip to the Noble County Jail, about 20 minutes out. On the way south, Tim McVeigh is trying to make small talk. I wasn't in much of a talkative mood, but he's asking me how he can get his weapon back. He's wanting to know what kind of weapon I was carrying at the time. I told him a SIG Motor 228. And he said, "Oh, a 9mm. I said, "Yes, that's correct." Again, I knew that this tells me that he's a gun enthusiast because he knows a lot about firearms. He's wanting to know how fast my car would run. A little talk. I look in the mirror and I see a car approaching us. We're in the right-hand lane. There was a car coming up on us fast in the left-hand lane. And as he gets beside us, I can tell it's an unmarked police unit of some kind. Plainclothes guys in there. They acknowledged who they were, so I wouldn't stop them, and they continue on south, I assume, going to Oklahoma City. We get to the Noble County Jail, and at that time it was on the fourth floor, the top floor of the courthouse. I take Tim McVeigh up there, and we begin the booking process. Everything's moving along fine. He's answering the jailer's questions. There's a young lady named Marcia who was the jailer that morning. She had booked in numerous prisoners for me over the years. And back behind the booking desk was a computer that I decided to sit down there and begin my probable cause affidavit and other documents for this arrest for the district attorney. And so I'm working on that, and she's asking all the questions in the booking process. And she gets to the question, "Who do you want to list as your next of kin?" He didn't answer. And I heard her ask him again, "Who do you want to list as your next of kin?" He still didn't answer, so I thought he's getting ready to give her a bad time. So I get up from the desk, come to the end of the booking counter. I said, "Did you hear the question?" He indicated he did. I said, "Answer." He still didn't answer the question. So Marcia, she's a very calm, professional lady. She begins to explain to him, "We're not wanting to call your family or anybody to tell them you're in jail. We just need a number in case you would get sick or get hurt while you're here." She says, "What about this address on your driver's license? Who lives there?" Now this was a Michigan driver's license with a Decker, Michigan address. And he says, "Well, that is a brother of a friend I was in the military with." Of course, we know later that that friend that he was in the military with was his co-conspirator, Terry Nichols. James Nichols lived at the address that was on his license. So that's who she listed as the next of kin, was James Nichols and his address and phone number. The booking procedure went on, nothing happening. He cooperated, was changed out into jail clothing. The sheriff then took him and locked him in a cell. I went back downstairs to the sheriff's department, was on the first floor of the courthouse, began the process of turning my evidence into the sheriff. And I was sitting there doing that and completing other paperwork when I get another call from my headquarters. This time they wanted me to respond to Interstate 35 and look for a brown Chevrolet pickup occupied by 3 Middle Eastern males who were believed to be involved in what we knew now was the bombing of the Murrayville. So I report to the Interstate 35, set up in the center median, and I began looking for this pickup. Sit out there for a considerable time. Nothing comes by my location even remotely matching that description. I'm released from that assignment. I go to lunch. This would have been my Friday, even though it was a Wednesday. This was my Friday. And I start 3 days off at 3 o'clock. So I go home at 3 o'clock, park my unit, and begin my days off. Watching the television like everybody else, just entranced in what they're showing and what's happening. Friday morning, about mid-morning, I get a call from my dispatcher, and they're wanting to know if I ran a particular social security number through NCIC. And they give me this number. It's a low-digit number, like 123. Not common to our area because most of our social security numbers start in the 400 range. And I tell them, I think that was the guy I put in jail Wednesday, but I'd have to call the jail, look at the booking card to confirm it. They said, will you do that? I said, yes, I'll call you right back. Call the jail, they check the booking card. Yes, that was the Tim McVeigh Social Security. I call back to my dispatcher. I said, yes, that's the guy put in jail Wednesday. Is he still there? I don't know, probably not. Usually people bond out the next day. And she says, well, you need to call the major's office in Oklahoma City at the command post. It was at that time I found out that Tim McVeigh was a suspect in the bombing of Alfred P. Murrayville. I was instructed to call the sheriff back and to tell him to place a hold on Tim McVeigh because I had already been told on that second call that he was in the process of being taken before the judge, so the bond would be set and he would have an opportunity to bond out. I called the sheriff back to tell him that he was a suspect and that I need to place a hold on him. At first I think he thought I was joking. The sheriff at that time was a former trooper. We've been friends for a long time. So I had to really convince him, no, I'm not kidding. This is a real deal. We need to put a hold on him. He immediately goes upstairs, gets a hold of the district attorney, and tells him what's going on. The judge at that time assigns Tim McVeigh an attorney there in Noble County. Tim McVeigh's taken back upstairs, locked up, and I'm instructed to go to the sheriff's office and that the FBI would be in touch with me there. Or divine intervention. Why is Tim McVeigh there 2 days after he's been arrested? Thursday morning, when he should have seen the judge was tied up on a divorce case. Didn't see any inmates that day. So it was postponed to the next day. Friday morning, when court would have been around 9 o'clock or so, court was delayed because the judge's son missed a school bus, taking him to a band function in Stillwater. That has to be divine intervention because he was still there when he needed it. I drove my personal vehicle into the sheriff's office that morning and walked into the sheriff's office. He was on the phone with the FBI. He handed me the phone. I visited with them. They wanted to know where the car was. I told them, as far as I know, it's still at the side of the road. They wanted to meet me there at that location where the car was, and they would be arriving by way of helicopter from Oklahoma City as soon as they could. My partner at that time, Trooper Kuhn, was in service, and he picked me up at the sheriff's office. We went to the location, and the car was there. Here, just as I left it. Here in a little bit, we see this military helicopter circling, looking for a landing zone, and you can imagine that drew a lot of attention on the interstate, seeing this military helicopter landing off to the side of the interstate, and 10 or 12 agents, ATF and FBI agents, pouring out there with ATF and FBI on their back. So the traffic began, slowing down, watching what was going on. The supervisory agent contacted me there, and he wanted me to look at the car, make sure it was secure, the windows were still up, the doors were still locked, to peer inside to make sure everything looked as I left it. It was still locked, everything was the same. I saw the same items in the car that I saw that Wednesday morning. So they decided to get a federal search warrant, have the car moved to a different location so they could execute that warrant in a better conditions than along that side of Interstate 35. So they called for a record. I'm instructed to go back to Perry and wait on them. There'd be an agent there to take my statement. Before I left, though, there was an alert agent that apparently saw this Jeep drive by our location and went back, went north of us, turned around across the center median, or went to the next interchange, came back, cut the center median south of us, was coming by us a second time, very slow, snapping pictures as he went by. And so this agent waves him over, find out, what he's doing, who he is, and he's an Associated Press reporter out of Arizona on vacation. But, and the job that he does, he recognized something's going on and started documenting it. They let him keep his camera and his photos and everything and sent him on his way. But no doubt he's the individual that probably tipped off the local media that something was going on in the northern part of Oklahoma. My partner and I returned back to the Noble County Courthouse. When we turned the corner to enter the courthouse drive, I thought another crime had occurred while we were gone. Because crime scene tape encircled the whole courthouse and the entrances, the Perry Police Department had a perimeter set up with officers keeping everybody out of that area. But another crime had not occurred. In fact, the county commissioners and the sheriff had taken precautions to get the employees out of that building, thinking they may be in harm's way, not knowing if Tim McVeigh may have friends who tried to blow that building up, or try to help him escape. I entered into the courthouse, awaited the FBI agent's arrival, and he took my statement. By this time when we got there, a crowd of people were beginning to gather up outside the courthouse square. If you're familiar with Perry, there's a large courthouse square, big yard area. By the time I was finished with my interview, or giving my statement to the FBI, a large group of people and numerous media outlets were in Perry. I would say there was probably 2,000 to 3,000 people in the courthouse. My pickup that I driven there that morning, I went out and when I was getting ready to leave, I go out the west door and I could see that some news outlet has a ladder in the back of my pickup so they can get secret footage, and so I thought, I'm not even going to try to get it. I didn't want to be encountered by the news media anyway. I couldn't talk to them. I had nothing to tell them. And so I asked one of my trooper buddies to take me home. I lived in a rural area outside of town a few miles. As I'm walking out, I'm not in uniform, in blue jeans and a t-shirt. But, in a small community, everybody knows they're police officers or sheriff, troopers. As I walk out the door, somebody yells my name, and the media begins to try to focus on me. Well, by the time I get home, the news media had already found my house. Come to find out later, is they first went to the local florist and tried to buy flowers to send to my house so they could follow him and find out. The florist was a friend of mine. He said, "No, I know what you're doing. I don't need your business address. I'm not going to sell you the flowers. I'm not going to lead you to his house." But there was a young man in Perry, like all teenage kids, I'd say, know where law enforcement officers live. He had drawn a map to my house and made copies and was selling it to the news media. So when I got there, the media was there. And they ended up, the patrol ended up stationing a couple of troopers there to keep the media away from my home. I'd already made arrangements to have my children taken out of school, taken to my wife's place of employment so that the media couldn't try to contact them. When I got in the house, the phone was just ringing. It was constantly ringing. It did not quit. The answering machine had filled up, had rewound, and was taking over the first messages. So they had to put an unlisted phone number in my house so I could even have a phone to call out and receive calls. It was rather chaotic, something you don't dream yourself being involved in. I had not been back in my unit since that Wednesday. Now it's Friday, that's all this occurred. Saturday morning I get a call from the command post and the major instructing me to come to Oklahoma City Saturday evening, meet with the governor, and go to a church to visit with people who were waiting the word of their loved ones. Some of them knew that their loved ones had been killed in the bombing. Others were still waiting to find out whether they would be found alive or not. When I got back in my unit that Saturday, I always did a cursory search of the area of my car before I went to work, especially if I'd had an inmate in there previously, to make sure nothing was laying around that could be used against me as a weapon. And I began doing that, and I'm looking, and I look in the right rear floorboard, and I see a crumpled up piece of paper in my right rear floorboard, and I pick that up, and I start unfolding it, and it's a business card to a military surplus store in Antigua, Wisconsin, which I later found out is a suburb of Chicago. On the back of that card, it said, "I will need more TNT at $5 a stick. We'll contact you after May 1st. There's no doubt in my mind, when Tim McVeigh was squirming around in my car that morning, I thought he was trying to get out of his handcuffs, that he was removing that card from his pocket, stuffing it behind the seat where he was sitting, and at some point it fell to the floorboard behind him. I placed that in an envelope, labeled it as evidence, turned it over to the FBI when I got to Oklahoma City. Later, that was printed at the FBI laboratory in Quantico, and the only prints found on that card were mine and Tim McVeigh's. Now, that would make you believe that maybe Tim McVeigh had other targets if he's needing more TNT and will contact this individual after May 1. I don't know that to be true, but he would lead me to believe that possibly he did. As we all know, Tim McVeigh was tried and convicted, not in Oklahoma, but in Denver, Colorado, because it was believed that he could not receive a fair trial in Oklahoma, and probably he couldn't have. But he did receive a fair trial with good representation. He had a legal team at his disposal. A jury of his peers heard that evidence, and he was found guilty in federal court for the deaths of the 8 federal officers that were killed that day in Oklahoma City. Sentenced to death, and that death sentence was carried out in 2001. Now, regardless of what your feelings might be on the death penalty, and I know there's a lot of people that don't support the death penalty, and that's okay. We live in America. We can agree or disagree. It's okay. But one thing's for sure, Tim McVeigh will never harm another individual. He will never influence anyone else to do what he did. His co-conspirator, Mr. Terry Nichols, also tried in Denver, Colorado by a different jury at a different time, at a different sentence. He received life in the federal prison system. He was brought back to Oklahoma and tried in McAlester, Oklahoma, and I believe 2004 for the 160 deaths of the civilians killed on April the 19th, 1995. Again, he was convicted. Again, he received life sentence in the state of Oklahoma as well. He's serving his sentence at Supermax in Colorado. He'll never get out of prison, nor should he. I told you that we would talk about divine intervention. I believe that was strongly believe that took place that day by the way that things happened. If there not have been that divine intervention, I would have never crossed paths with Tim McVeigh and had that opportunity to arrest him. Any officer could have made that arrest that day. I just happened to be at the right spot at the right time. Traffic enforcement. That exemplifies that traffic enforcement has benefits far beyond the traffic stop itself. The traffic stop is very important. Because of traffic enforcement, we reduce accidents and fatalities in our states and keep our roads safer. When officers go beyond that traffic stop and they look for criminal activity during that traffic stop, you already have a legal right to detain this person because he's committed a traffic violation in front of you. Now it's up to the officer to be alert, to see what he can see what he can hear, to visit with that individual, to see if his story or if there's more than one occupant of the other stories match up and make sense, to see if there's maybe some ongoing criminal activity. That happens every day in the state of Oklahoma with law enforcement from all levels, local, state, county. It doesn't matter who's conducting that stop. But as citizens, what can we do? There's not enough law enforcement eyes and ears out there to hear and see everything that needs to be heard or seen, because there's things happen in your community, in your neighborhood, that you recognize as suspicious, that Sheriff Rice and I may not recognize that suspicious behavior because we don't live in your neighborhood every day. We're not there every day. So if you will report that suspicious activity to your law enforcement agency, whoever that might be, we would rather go out and check out hundreds or thousands of something, reports that turn out to be nothing, than to miss that one call that might save someone's life, might solve a crime, or might prevent a crime from occurring. So it's very important that we have citizen involvement in law enforcement each and every day. If you see or hear something, say something. Thank you very much. You've been a very attentive group. Food was wonderful. I don't know who's responsible for fixing that, but they did a wonderful job. It's been my honor to be here today. And if you have any questions at all, I'll try to answer them at this time. Yes.
What was in the envelope?
In that envelope, it did not contain money as I thought. But inside were excerpts from a book called The Turner Diary, which was a fictitious book about the blowing up of a federal building using an ammonia nitrate bomb. And that book was Tim McVeigh's blueprint for what he did. Yes, in fact.
I don't have a question, but I would like to say thank you. My son is 5 years old. We're very fortunate about that, so we thank you.
Glad to hear that he did survive. He doing well?
Oh, it's still emotional.
Sure.
What about the moment that Timothy had an advantage over you and he didn't take it? Did you suggest that perhaps he was calmer, didn't look like the description you should have been? Did he not have a chance to plug you before you would have responded?
The only chance I feel like he would have had to shoot me was when he came out of the car. He would have had to come up and shoot me.
Yes.
But I firmly believe that Tim McVeigh was a coward. Had he came out shooting at me, I'm behind some cover.
Yeah.
He would have had to have made his rounds count quick because he would have been fully exposed to my gunfire. And should have not been immobilized. But you know, Tim McVeigh ambushed the victims in the North building. They had no chance to defend themselves. He knew I was armed. I don't think he wanted to put himself in harm's way.
Thank you.
Did you read his book, American Terrorist? The one, Tim McVeigh, the book, about from his perspective. Did you read that?
I read parts of it. I talked with Mr. Lou Michel, who
Right.
had written that book.
Right.
Lou and I don't think on the same level. He talked to me before he talked to Tim McVeigh.
Right.
And then when he talked to Tim, he called me back and he said, I wanted to clarify something. He said, Tim McVeigh said the incident where you nudged him in the back of the head with the gun never happened. I said, well, I'll tell you what, Lou, you believe who you want, but don't call me back.
Thank you so much, Sheriff.
Come on out to the Tulsa RV Ranch Arena. Events happening every weekend all throughout the year. KC Team Roping and Chuck Wagon races this weekend. Amarillo All Indian Rodeo the next weekend. Coming up, we got barrel races, World Series roping, and IRC rodeo. And more Chuck Wagon races. Come on out, folks.